In the nursery of my childhood home hung a piece of art that read, "A child is not a thing to be molded, but a person to be unfolded." I, then my younger sister, then our younger brother, slept near that art all our baby years. I asked my mom about it last week. She told me it encapsulated her parenting philosophy wholly, that everybody is their own unique person, and her job as a parent was to keep us safe and protected, but help us have the experiences and the confidence to unfold into who we were meant to be. And what a tender sentiment. How easy it is to extend that kind of grace to a snuggly little satisfiable baby without much autonomy or mobility. I think anyone who has loved children can relate to the experience of gazing at them, feeling protective of their best interests and hopeful for the future. But how many of us can tap into that same generosity of spirit with an emotionally distant partner, a noisy neighbor, a needy relative, someone who voted against your rights? It's not so easy to gaze upon them with hearts in our eyes and say, "Oh, you're just unfolding into the person you're meant to be." That kind of work, building tolerance for what's different, is something that I love about Unitarian Universalism. Having found my way to this faith community in my early 20s, I quickly recognized that our spaces, when tended to with care, provide a sanctuary for many who have been rejected elsewhere, while also acting as incubators for diverse people to explore diverse relationships. The bounties of our space are many, though we are no more panacea of community than any other space built by fallible people with good intentions. I learned a lot about community from being a part of my home congregation in Las Vegas. In a particularly changeful time, we cycled through 2 ministers and then into a season of lay leadership. While there was strong shared belief that we belonged together, we were often faced with situations that highlighted how, despite our shared values, we used different strategies to bring them to life. And there isn't a better way for me to illustrate this dynamic for you than to tell you a little story about what we called the back lot. The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Las Vegas occupies an old Elks Lodge in a lower-income neighborhood of the city. The church's proximity to families and communities with need meant that we didn't need to go far to do the work of widening Love's Circle. The land that was owned by the church included the building itself, and then a couple acres behind the building that housed our trash cans and a small shed, and was otherwise relatively undisrupted natural desert landscape. What to do with this plot of land was a recurring conversation. The ideas, some materialized, some not, included hosting a cell tower and using the earnings to upkeep the property, converting the lot into a playground and a basketball court for the many families who were our neighbors, creating a garden or a green space that could serve as a spiritual respite, giving the land back to the indigenous Southern Paiute peoples, partitioning the lot and selling off part of it, and so many more. In the absence of decisions and follow-through, the space ended up blighted and sometimes occupied by houseless folks who would occasionally burn fires to keep warm and who once burned down a tree on the property. The community coalesced around the issue: what to do about this backlot space. There were as many opinions, fears, and interests as people in the room. And these diversions of opinion were not unemotional or simple matters. For example, regarding the matter of our houseless neighbors, some members of the congregation felt it is our job to offer as much safety and shelter as we can, while others felt unsafe around the people, their behaviors, and the messes that they often left. They even suggested using police force to have them removed, which pulled another complicated thread. Having cops invited into our sanctuary of safety and equity and justice made some people feel safer and others much less safe. I share this example because it's important to remember that just because our communities share a set of core values doesn't mean we have the same ideas of how to bring them to life. It seems that through time and space, crossing language barriers and political regimes, in intimate relationships or on a global scale, the gritty and difficult parts of building and sustaining community are evergreen, which means our commitment to working toward peace and resilience in community must be too. We've always been trying and failing and trying again to build beloved community, which is formed, Bell Hooks says, not by the eradication of difference, but instead its affirmation, by each of us claiming the identities and cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in the world. I believe that our shared theology, which at its best fortifies us to meet our differences with curiosity and grace, may act as a guidepost in a time when building community is more fraught and maybe more necessary than ever. When we come together as Unitarian Universalists, we decide how we want to be together. This is an attraction and an imperative of our faith, because in lieu of shared beliefs, we have shared behaviors. And in identifying them, we act alongside our siblings across time and space in the act of creating covenant. Covenant is a mutual sacred promise between individuals or groups to stay in relationship, to care about each other, and to work together in good faith. This is so idyllic in theory and so messy in practice. Parker Palmer, educator, activist, and author of our first reading, continues his commentary on community by saying, "In true community, we will not choose our companions, for our choices are so often limited by self-serving motives. Instead, our companions will be given to us by grace. Often they will be persons who will upset our settled views of self and the world. In fact," he continues, "we might define true community as the place where the person you least want to live with lives." Community is the highest aspiration of the heart, a place for us to embody together an aliveness and a set of ethics that may elude us individually. In a society and a global moment that obsesses over and lauds individualism, our ability and our willingness to nurture community is both a spiritual practice and a rejection of empire, which feeds on our separateness. Real community is what exists on the other side of convenience, calling us to heed our better angels and act in the interest of the common good. We don't do community because there's some assurance that it's always going to feel good. We commit to staying even when it doesn't. Many people draw parallels between nurturing a community and nurturing a marriage, playing the long game, not keeping score, extending grace, knowing it won't always be good and therefore not expecting that. But I have never been married, so I can't give you advice on that one. The idea is that we must, again and again, relinquish our expectations of purity or perfection. As functions of white supremacy, these conditions do nothing but separate us from each other, ourselves, and our shared future. These popular norms of individualism and competition, along with call-out and cancel cultures, create fertile ground for us to focus more on the risk of coming together than the benefit of it. Most of us really are not trained to have strong community muscles, yet here in this space, we share a value of interdependence, which calls us to remember that we are each but one tiny part of a much larger, more precious, regenerating community that spans to include ancestors, descendants, flora, fauna, and the land itself. It is a privilege to live within sight and sound of each other, to bear witness to the messiness that it is to become someone. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, we are brilliant at survival, but brutal at it. We tend to slip out of togetherness the way we slip out of the womb, bloody and messy and surprised to be alone. The belief in beloved community is something that anchors us both to the founding and to the future of our faith. So perhaps it's helpful to consider how we can continue developing skills in doing so. There is an article that I've been meditating over lately, in which the author suggests that people interested in building community de-escalate all conflict that isn't with the enemy. De-escalate all conflict that isn't with the enemy. If what Alexis Pauline Gumbs, author of our second reading, tells us is true, that knowing who we're with helps us know where we're at and where we want to be, then how do we differentiate between who is with us and who isn't? And how do we know who the enemy is? The enemy is not the person who has disrupted your worldview. It's not someone who has caused you an inconvenience. It's not the person whose strategy you don't understand as they work to achieve your shared goal. Yet circles of people doing the work of creating more justice, equity, and love in the world are often mired down by infighting, the perception of the other as wrong, or by expecting some version of perfection. Systems of oppression rely on us to turn away from each other, to abandon each other when sticking together becomes inconvenient, because that makes just enough space for the status quo to flow in and take over once more. Patriarchy relies on women abandoning each other in hopes of gaining greater proximity to power through men. White supremacy relies on people of color abandoning each other in hopes of gaining greater proximity to power through whiteness. But these systems of oppression, they are ill-prepared for us to find ways to collaborate and build across lines of difference, to build coalition. Coalition building is the act of forming an alliance between groups to increase overall power. Many voices speak louder than just one, and many of the most important societal changes can be attributed to the power of coalition. One of the most famous coalitions, between James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, paved the path to the ratification of our Constitution. These two worked together with others over 3 critical years to conceive, theorize, ratify, and then pass the US Constitution. And this feat was not made possible based on a best friendship that was built on tremendous similarity, as these two differed nearly as much as any two people could. Hamilton's tendencies to be charming, loquacious, vain, and immodest were foils to Madison's reserved humility, shrewdness, quiet intellect, and some would say frailty. Despite their differences, their cooperative efforts during a critical moment in time framed the governmental structure that we mostly still exist within today. The impact of coalitions isn't limited to national nation-founding politics. Coalition building between children's advocates, religious leaders, and unions to enact child labor laws in the early 20th century paved the path for workers' rights that protect us still today. And the vibrant political activity of the 1950s and 1960s saw coalitions support the passing of strong, life-affirming legislation that included the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. In our shared faith tradition, coalitions have been formed and maintained to bring our values-aligned work to life, including the UU Climate Justice Coalition, the Unitarian Universalist Animal Ministry, Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, diverse and revolutionary UU Multicultural Ministries, the UU Women's Federation, and so many more. Through these various coalitions within Unitarian Universalism, where people have coalesced around a shared identity or interest, our circle of love has been made wider, more accessible, and we have been more impactful on the global community. Coalitions within our faith can also be credited with achieving many of our most important steps forward, too. This includes the hard work done in good faith by strongly convicted people who organized according to their values in 1961 that led to the merger of our two origin faith communities. It was also coalition work that codified the eighth principle, a statement of explicit anti-racism adopted by nearly 300 Unitarian Universalist communities and congregations, including our own. And most recently, in the analysis of our own founding documents, our co-religionists coalesced to replace our sources and principles with love-centered values. Now, it's important to not romanticize this work or shroud it in an ideal of ease or certain success. The work of coming together to accomplish a shared goal is as flawed as every person who's along for the ride. You don't have to look far either in Unitarian Universalism or the wider world to find examples of hard-fought coalitions who fell short of their goals or were waylaid by opposite and stronger forces outside their control. Even our own striving religious community has seen coalitions banded together in support of quite unsavory positions, including anti-abolition, eugenics, and apartheid. And back to the Constitution for a moment. Not only did James Madison and Alexander Hamilton not end life on good terms, by their respective deaths, they had each spent years ascribing bad motives on the other. You could even say they were partaking in some 18th century cancel culture. Their ideologies diverged so much that not only did they lose their friendship, but many of their differences are also entombed in the political structure that we exist in today. In retrospect, perhaps their coming together and finding such verdant common ground in the first place is the greatest surprise of all. I think these true and messy stories without fairy tale endings are important as we understand coalition building as a function of being in community, especially at a time when severe divisions foment so much distrust and violence. Every day, we see how the power of the people isn't always used for the collective good. But every day, we also see how the power of the people is sacrificed because we are too busy or too tired, or we lack the imagination or skills of communicating across difference. These systems of oppression that we are committed to dismantling are relying on our unwillingness to coalesce around what we have in common. The power of coalitions comes not from successfully establishing an echo chamber of many people with the same identity markers and viewpoints, but from finding consensus in diversity, from finding common ground that is firm enough to build on. Unlike communities, which have the potential to serve us for our whole life long, coalitions rise and fall based on necessity. These agreements we make to intentionally come together in recognition of a shared desired outcome is a chance for us to put our commitment to interdependence into practice. And in this season, as we consider and practice dissent, it's good for us to remember that while what we believe in and want to be true in the world is a strong tie that binds us together, what we want to end and defund and prevent are also things to coalesce around. The U.S. Constitution is a tool that anticipates and supports political factional disagreement, and I think our covenants do the same. These documents solidify our commitment to behave a certain way, especially in groups, even in times of discontent, without expecting perfection. Now, perhaps you're thinking that right now is a precarious time to build an argument on the strength of the US Constitution, as every day we witness the attempt of its dismantling piece by piece. But then again, we can only be sure that tools work when we use them to do the job that they were meant for. September 17th was Constitution Day, which commemorates the document's creation and adoption. In this moment that some scholars are calling constitutional failure or collapse, legal scholar Aziz Rana suggests that this moment calls us not to rally around the Constitution, but to protect and expand meaning-making institutions that incorporate values of democracy and solidarity into everyday life and provide tangible services to the communities. It's a long quote, but I'm going to read it again. That this moment calls us not to rally around the Constitution, but to protect and expand meaning-making institutions that incorporate values of democracy and solidarity into everyday life and provide tangible services to their communities. That sounds a lot like the work that we do here. The founding and framing documents that shape our world and community are the best efforts of imperfect humans to respond to needs at a particular moment in time. And it is our charge to infuse these static words on a page with the energy and sustenance needed to carry us through difficult times. Our guiding documents, Constitution and Covenant, are aspirational. The community we build daily in our homes and hearts and public spaces, these are aspirational too. They say we'll protect and practice freedom, liberation, and change. They say we'll try to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to encourage one another. They do not say that this will be easy or convenient or without conflict. They do not glorify one strategy above another, and if they're concerned with true thriving, they generally don't lock the door behind anyone. So this is the lesson for us. Too often in community, we are willing to believe that our opponents are not just wrong, but are our enemies. We allocate finite, precious time to fostering contempt, and we obscure our own ability to do critical work in the world. So, as we work to live and lead and love in systemic collapse, let us remember this, that solidarity is power plus love plus direction. What we generate together, based on what we believe should be true or not, what we're willing to fight for with our whole lives and our whole hearts, is the string that connects us forward and back in time to all those who have built before us, and for all those sweet babies yet to unfold into the person that they're becoming. When we come together and create covenant, we are able to receive the love, grace, belonging, and forgiveness that already exists within us, mirrored back by others in a sacred affirmation of our interdependence. This happens especially in diverse spaces. As seekers, we willingly choose to love each other and stay in relationship over and over, again and again. And in this way, although the road may sometimes be rough, by leaning into the transformational power of our faith, we can always begin again in covenant to love. May it be so.